Have you ever looked at a houseplant? A little green thing sitting quietly on your windowsill and thought to yourself, yeah, this is worth more than a mansion in downtown London. No? Well, neither would any rational person today. But back in the 1630s, people weren't just thinking it, they were betting their entire life savings on it. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Finvestorz. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the wildest, most absurd, and downright fascinating financial bubbles in human history, the Tulip Mania. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's talk about how a simple flower brought an entire superpower to its knees. Let's start with part 1. How a flower conquered Europe. To understand this madness, we have to travel back to 17th century Holland. This was the Dutch Golden Age. Trade was booming, ships were sailing across the globe, and Amsterdam had transformed into the financial capital of the world. A brand new, incredibly wealthy merchant class had just exploded onto the scene. And do you know, when people get rich very suddenly, my dear friends, listen to it carefully. What is the first thing they want to do? They want to show everybody else that they are rich. Back then, you couldn't flex with a luxury sports car or a Swiss watch. So, what did the ultra wealthy use to flex? Exotic plants. And nothing was more exotic, mysterious, and downright breathtaking than the tulip. Tulips were not native to Europe. They were imported from the Ottoman Empire, and Europeans went completely crazy for them. They had never seen colors this vibrant, petals this striking. But here is where nature played a little trick on everyone. Sometimes a tulip bulb would get infected by a harmless, mysterious virus known as the mosaic virus, which caused wild, flame like patterns to erupt across the petals. These weren't just flowers anymore, they were biological masterpieces. And the rarer the pattern, the higher the price tag climbed. Correct? Let's move on to part 2, the birth of the madness, how it all began. At first, buying and selling these bulbs was a normal hobby for botanists and wealthy collectors. But greed has a funny way of turning a hobby into a full blown casino. Soon, everyday people, artisans, weavers, innkeepers, and farmers started noticing that their neighbors were getting rich overnight just by trading these bulbs. Prices started to skyrocket. Why keep working a regular 9 to 5 job when you could buy a bulb today, hold it for a week, and sell it to someone else for double the money? Charming. My dear friends, this is the exact moment human psychology takes the wheel and logic hits the brakes. By the mid 1630s, the market had evolved into something truly surreal. People weren't even trading physical flowers anymore. Remember, tulip bulbs are seasonal. They only bloom for a few weeks in the spring, and they have to be dug up and moved during specific months. So, how did they trade them year around? They invented paper contracts. People started trading promises to buy bulbs in the future. They called it wind handle, literally translated as wind trade. You were literally buying and selling thin air. At the peak of the mania in 1636 and 1637, a single rare tulip bulb like the famous Semper Augustus could cost upwards of 5,000 guilders. To put that into perspective so people can understand it, a skilled craftsman back then earned about 150 to 300 guilds a year. You can see the comparison. It's wide open for you to understand, yeah? Let that sink in for a moment. One single onion looking bulb could buy you a magnificent, sprawling canal house in the heart of Amsterdam, complete with a carriage and servants with cash to spare. People were trading entire estates, herds of cattle, and fleets of ships all for a handful of dirt and petals. Yeah, this was happening. Now let's slide into the part 3. And don't be surprised, the name is The Inevitable Crash. You don't need a degree in economics to know how this story ends. Physics tells us that what goes up must come down. And financial history tells us that bubbles always pop. The turning point came out of nowhere in February 1637 in a sleepy little Dutch town called Haarlem. A routine tulip auction was being held, just like any other week. The auctioneer called out the bids, the crowd murmured, and for the very first time in years, nobody bought. Just like that, the spell was broken. It wasn't a coordinated panic. It was just a sudden collective realization. Wait a minute. This is just a flower. None of these makes any sense at all. Panic spread through the markets faster than a wildfire in dry bush. Everyone wanted to sell at the exact same time. but nobody wanted to buy. The price of wind handle, hope you remember, I explained you wind handle, crashed by 99% in a matter of days. Imagine waking up on a Monday morning as a millionaire on paper, owning those contracts for 20 rare tulip bulbs, and by Friday afternoon, those contracts aren't even worth the ink they are printed on. People were left holding worthless pieces of paper bound by legal contracts to pay thousands of guilders for bulbs that you couldn't even sell for the price of a cabbage. The Dutch economy suffered a massive shock. Courts were flooded with lawsuits from bankrupt buyers trying to get out of the contracts. But the government eventually stepped in, ruling that these speculative debts were essentially gambling debts and didn't have to be paid in full. Part 4, of course, the lesson. So, why are we talking about 400-year-old flowers on a modern financial channel called Finvestorz? Because human nature never changes, my friends. Let's not forget the cryptocurrencies. Fast forward through the centuries and you will see the exact same story playing out over and over again. Swap out tulip bulbs for railroad stocks in the 19th century, dot-com internet companies in the late 1990s, housing mortgages in 2008, and the most recent one, the speculative digital tokens today. The asset changes, the technology changes, but the underlying psychology is same. It is always driven by the exact same toxic cocktail: fear of missing out, FOMO, cheap credits, and the belief that this time it's different. It's always the same, my dear friends. History doesn't always repeat itself word for word, but it showed us rhyme. And the best defense against financial bubbles is education, patience, and a healthy dose of skepticism. When someone tells you they found a guaranteed way to get rich quick. Sorry for my antics. If you enjoyed taking this historical journey through the wildest days of finance, needless to say, the like button should have been pressed by now. It has been shared already, right? And you have subscribed to my channel, Finvestorz. My name is Aditya Porwal. I worked in investment banking industry for around 20 years. Join me in knowing our history, financial, education, tips and tricks, and we have got a website called finvestorz.com. Do visit that too. Thank you.